So obviously we're behind. So like if anyone wants to share their story of how they were impacted with personal stories about hey, they got impacted where they lost they got their catalytic converter stolen, you can begin doing that as well, doing that right now. So if anyone wants to share their story, this is the opportunity right now.
Well, can you folks hear me right now?
Yes, yes.
Yep, this is Gary Brown,
Yes.
and I'm up on the corner of Bates and McLean, and we've had the delightful experience of not one but two catalytic converters leaving our yard. At one, it was I think it was about a 3:34 a.m. when I heard the delightful sound of what sounded like a garbage can being hauled across the street. I looked out my window. Right under a street lamp, they were cutting out the converter. I looked at my security camera later on. It was about 2 minutes total between the time they showed up and they roared out after I yelled out the window at them. So that was the first time. The next time was my stepdaughter was parked in back on our alley on our parking pad, and she had hers pulled out. Both of those were Priuses, and you know, getting a police response, they showed up, but it was kind of, what are you going to do, because they are in and there and out of there so quickly. What I've done now is put a bicycle motion detector on a 2x4, stuck it underneath the car, and if they try to get at the converter, they're going to set off that motion detector and it'll yell at them, and hopefully that'll dissuade them. But it's when I brought the converter or brought the car in to get replaced, the shop said, we're like the fifth one today that's come in here. So yeah, it's here, and even parking under a street light doesn't do anything to stop them from going after the converter. So that's my story.
Uh-huh. Does anyone else?
Yeah, Kathleen Ross here. So literally yesterday at 7:58 a.m. Sunday morning, outside my window, I hear the noise. You try and place it. We look out the window, and there's a car and two, I'm going to assume, kids in a hoodie because of their slight build. It was broad daylight. It's Sunday morning. It's snowing. They drive off by the time we get out there. And, there's tracks, but what are we going to do? Chase them down on foot? And I had heard reports that it was happening, but literally in my own driveway, they took it. And to boot, my car is a 99, so it had absolutely no value. The catalytic converter was already dead. So they're just taking for volume and, just saying, well, we'll take it because it's easy and go.
So I just wanted to share that there was a couple of citizens shared me their story as well because they're not able to attend. So there was a citizen that shared that their Mitsubishi Outlander Sport was their catalytic converter was stolen, and was during the holiday seasons. So like it's really impactful when people are barely making ends meet, and during important times where these type of thefts happen. It can happen to anyone at any given point. And the part that's frustrating for regular citizens is sometimes the wait to get the catalytic converter replaced can take months on end, because this is happening so rapidly that the inventory takes a long time for it to be available. So some cars are in the repair shop for months on end. And so yeah, and obviously the cost differential of what the thieves get versus what the citizen pay is, tenfold, where citizens can pay thousands of dollars while the thieves may get only $100 or $150 for associated with the catalytic converter. So there's a big discrepancy in that regard.
Right now, if you have a Toyota Highlander, they're out over a month and a half on the part.
So fun story, my boyfriend is a mechanic and he said it's not only the market for, selling the converters themselves for the precious metals, but it's created that secondary raise in the market because, like you say, there's a wait list. Now you can't get them in the country.
Hi, this is Sarah. I live in the West Frogtown neighborhood, and similarly, when it happened to me just before the new year, I was pretty much told and from research that the only deterrent, at least for my vehicle, which is also an Outlander sport, is to get the cat clamp on it. And I mean, with full coverage, I'm thankful that I was able to take care of it, but $3,000 is the bill from the repair shop. And after getting the cat clamp installed and paying, deductibles and whatnot, I'm still putting in over $800 for what is merely a deterrent from it happening again. So I think I could echo that my neighbors, it's just happening in the driveway, right under lights with security cameras. There just seems to be no way to prevent it, at least that we're seeing yet. And it's such an expensive thing for so many people. It's a setback financially in repairs, in time, wages, transportation. There needs to be some sort of regulation on the end of the buyer.
This is Sophie. I'm back on the call. Sorry about that. We've had 3 catalytic converters stolen from our household. We had one from our Prius that was parked out on our street in, I think it was the end of February. And then later, so that was $1,000 out of pocket for our deductible. And February of 2020. And then a couple of days later, 5 or 6 catalytic converters got stolen in our neighborhood. A couple of our neighbors caught those on camera. And what seemed happened was the thieves came through, propped up or jacked up the cars. Some of them used stumps. Do not turn that on. And propped up all the cars and then came back like 10 minutes later, stole all the catalytic converters. As somebody already said, it's 2 to 3 minutes to cut them free. Some of the neighbors who had them stolen, young couples with young kids, elderly couples who are retired. Ours was stolen again. My son was at Play It Again Sports on Snelling at 11 o'clock in the morning during the day, ran into the store for 15 minutes, came out and recognized the sound. So that was the second time. And my minivan is now in the shop because its catalytic converter got stolen last week in the middle of the night. And as somebody else said, so we're out $3,000. We started parking the Prius in the garage. We can't park the minivan in the garage. We're going to get one of the shields, which will be another several $100s. But we are fortunate enough to be able to absorb that cost, not happily. But there are so many people where a bill like that is catastrophic and they can't pay their rent, they can't pay food. If they can't get their car fixed, they can't get to jobs. This is a really big issue and we need to do something to prevent the market for it so that people aren't suffering anymore.
I would just like to add that there's a feedback loop that's involved in it. So like the longer we address it, the more people for getting their car fixed, and the more valuable it becomes too. So like because there's a demand for getting the catalytic converter replaced, so it continues to be profitable for thieves to continue to steal. So this is why I think urgent legislation needs to be taken fairly quickly.
Hi, if I may. My name is Nicole Brown. I work over at an auto parts store. I've been working at this auto parts store for 1 month. My very first day, I had 3 people come in and ask about when a catalytic converter for their Prius, for their Toyota, anything really would be available and if we had them in stock. And the next day, my second day, 4 people came in asking about cats. My third day, 5 people came in. Just every single day, I'm hearing at least 3 people asking about cats. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what neighborhood do you live in? So then right there in the store, about if there's 7 people in the little waiting area waiting to get checked out, there's so many people that are, oh yeah, well, I live in Frogtown. Oh, I live in Midway. I live right on University. I'm right off Sherburne. Mine got stolen. Oh, my cousin just got hers stolen 2 yesterday. I have 2 on my truck. They're both gone. And this is my 3rd time. And I mean, it ends up being like a little bit of an uproar just in the lobby of the auto parts store. I'm watching the back orders for these cats just be, oh, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I deliver parts to the mechanics, and it's kind of rare that I actually get to deliver a cat. And they all have orders waiting for cats. Let's see, I deliver to 12 shops, and I'm only delivering maybe 1 or 2 cats a week. And they're at least $700, not including labor, not including the wait time. The other problem is, like somebody else brought up that I really recognize, is that there's a lot of people Ubering in. They Uber in from their neighborhood to the shop in order to be able to get anything. Can it still run? Can I still run that? And do you guys have, oh my gosh, the calls for the cages. And then I hear just on the, I'm very working class. I'm not middle class, I'm very working class. And I hear just in a game of cards or on a smoke break, and yeah, did you hear about so and so? Yeah, I think he's doing that dirty work. And it's like, who, man? A friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. And what my understanding is how it goes so quickly is that they can take a cordless bandsaw, which is kind of imagine. Does anyone know what a cordless bandsaw is? Look it up. And all you need to do is just literally go over to it and zoom, zoom. I mean, if they're taking 2 minutes, it's probably because they're trying to get comfortable laying on their back. It doesn't even take that long. I mean, that's that quick. Or maybe they're trying to scoot underneath there. How do we stop the supply and demand? If there's such a supply, how do we stop the demand? How do we make it less appealing? The cigarette conversations are, oh yeah, they can still get $2,000. They can still get this much and this much and this much, and these ones are better and these ones are better. And that's not necessarily from thieves. I'm not talking to the thieves, or if I am, they're really incognito. But I'm hearing what they're worth. I'm hearing about the metals, and I'm hearing about this demand and how easy it is. And then as these conversations go on, the conversation that I'm hearing every single day is, how do you regulate the scrappers? How do you the junkyards, the metal recyclers? How do you regulate that? Do you stop them? And then what's the black market for it? Who's working under the table? Who's working with this black market? Where's the demand coming from? That's my biggest one. Thanks.
This is Cynthia MacArthur. I'm in Mac Groveland, and I'm wondering, has anybody had any information about if a cat converter protector helps?
No, Nicole again. I know that they don't. It's just as easy. It's easier to cut through the cat cages as it is. I mean, the cages are much smaller, and just broaden it. I don't know if you guys have crawled underneath the car and looked where it is. You can cut all around it. I mean, if the cage covers the cat.
This is Cheryl Garahan. I'd like to add that I did hear from some people who had 2 cars. One, they had a cat shield on, and the other one they didn't. And the criminals stole the catalytic converter on the one that did not have a shield. So I think that they do help. I'll mute myself again.
This is Patty. They can be a deterrent. So they're always going to look for the softest target possible. So like the previous caller said, if there's one with a shield and one without, they're probably going to go after the one without the shield. They do have a new cat eye out now, which is a vibration sensor that puts out a very loud noise as soon as the vibration sensor goes off. So that might be an even bigger deterrent, but that's a new product.
Awesome.
Nicole again, but I just look at these deterrents as just another coping mechanism. You can cope from anything, but what about fixing the problem, right? You can put up another cage. I've heard of catalytic converters getting stolen even with the cages on. I've heard many of these accounts. If it's a deterrent, maybe they're only working with a cordless sawzall instead of a bandsaw. It's the tools, it's the speed, it's the skill, and the deterrents are maybe for the rookies. But where are these teams of people coming in? I'm really interested in some of more of the data in the suspects.
This is Cheryl Garahan, and again, and I'm sorry I'm late getting on, but I couldn't access the contact numbers I had. My catalytic converter was stolen 2 nights ago for the second time. And when I had to fix the first time, my auto shop said that, oh, it won't happen again because we put one on that the parts are not valuable. Like the first catalytic converter I had, my car was a 2009. So they said that they could have gotten up to $500 for it because it's the older models that have more valuable metals. So they put some non-valuable ones on it. Well, it's still going to cost over $2,000 to fix, whether it was a non-valuable replacement or not. So I've been researching literally obsessively for the last 48 hours on this, and listened to John Marty's the meeting he had last year at this time, and I'm appalled that the legislature hasn't done anything about this because this is critical. And you probably know, maybe I missed it, but the New York Times also did a big special on it. They had a program yesterday that my sister sent me from New York. This is everywhere. The tow truck that came to pick me up this morning, the driver lives in Coon Rapids, and he said they cut the catalytic converter from his truck on Friday night. It's everywhere. Lloyd's Automotive, where I go to get my car fixed, so they literally have had hundreds of them in this neighborhood that they have replaced. And I think that we have to get the insurance companies involved because it's lucrative for the auto shops, and it's lucrative for the criminals, and it's lucrative for the shops that are taking these catalytic converters. And I went online, and you can find dozens and dozens of businesses that are saying, we'll pay cash for these things, no questions asked. And then they list how much you can get for each catalytic converter from what kind of car. And it's a huge, huge problem across America and probably further. I think this the bill is a starting point, and I think it's critical, but I think that it's going to take a whole lot more. I think we have to get the insurance companies involved because they have a motive for getting on this, because it's costing not only the citizens a huge amount of money, but also the insurance companies. It's also a quality of life issue because I had an appointment to get my COVID shot today, which I had to cancel. I have a new dog, which was throwing up and had diarrhea over the weekend, and I had to cancel the vet appointment this morning because I couldn't get in. I couldn't get my meds today because I had no way to get to the pharmacy. I canceled a hair appointment, which is stupid, but that's not the least of my problems. I had critical banking I had to do on Saturday, which I couldn't do. And it has impacted so many areas of my life that nobody thinks about. Everybody thinks about the money, and the money is horrible. I am a senior. I'm retired. I'm raising a special needs son, and I'm raising my grandson. This is a horrible. What's the word I'm looking for? It's impacting my finances in a really critical way. And I don't think people, maybe the people who are doing it think, oh, they all have insurance. Well, I have $500 deductible. And some of the people that I've been reading about don't have insurance. And I think the insurance companies are going to stop covering this pretty soon. If they've covered mine twice, are they going to cover it the third time? I'm afraid that they're going to either cut me off or raise my premiums. So I'm really obsessed with this, and I will do whatever I can. I've been getting everybody, there's a petition out there, and I've been getting everybody I can to sign the petition. We have to get more people on board, because obviously this didn't even get heard last year. And I don't know what we have to do to get this heard, because this, this is grand larceny. I mean, when you're stealing parts that are worth over $2,000 to these shops that are taking them in, and cost over $2,000 for the person who's replacing it, that's grand larceny. I don't care if the guy who's stealing it is only getting $50 or $200. We have to change the law that this is grand larceny. This is a felony, and we need to change the laws to accommodate this.
All right, thank you so much for sharing. And we're going to put a pause in comments, so there's going to be a lot of opportunity near the end to share comments and also hear what the legislators have to say. So first off, I would like to thank Senator John Marty to joining us, and also State Representative Tony Jurgens for joining us as well. But first, I would like to give it to Patty Lammers. She's in the St. Paul Police Department. Is going to go over some details about catalytic converter thefts. How can citizens be better prepared and also address it going forward? So she has a little presentation prepared.
And I don't want to take up a lot of the time, because I want to leave plenty of time for Senator Marty. I just wanted to kind of give you a bigger picture idea of what we've been facing. And I won't go through all of these. This is just the view of the entire city and how we have it split up into the 3 districts. And that's giving you an idea, because one district has been hit critically harder than the other 2 districts. So this is the catalytic converter theft information from 2014 through 2020. You can see, beginning in 2014, over the last 3 years, we have seen huge growth in the amount of catalytic converters that have been stolen. So 45 in 2014, up to 690. And this was only through September of 2020. So there was a huge amount stolen just in 2020. And these are the ones that have just been reported to the police department. Not everyone reports the theft to the police department because a lot of people just turn it into their insurance company. And they happen so quickly. And if there's no video, there's really no cause for us to be able to track them down often. This is the per district, and I really wanted to show you this when I said one district has been hit harder than the other. Western District by far takes the brunt of the catalytic converter thefts. That's why when Nicole was talking and she was saying so many people off of University, Sherburne, that's all Western District. They had 445 out of the 690 stolen last year just in that district. And that's the area from Frogtown to Minneapolis, Roseville through Highland Park. This is sort of the 3-year trend. This is sort of how it looks like. We breaking it out by that, but I wanted to show you the grids too. The first 10 grids are all Western District grids. So these are the areas where they're most likely to be stolen. And we have them broken out. This is by week, but one I wanted to show you was, again, this is all by days of the week. And this is by grid. So these are the top grids in each district. So those that are joining us from the east side, you can see grid 117 is the top grid over there, followed shortly behind 39, 55, and 13. Those living in the north end, you're going to get 92 over there. And then the Western District grids, and those range all over the place from Frogtown over to Mac-Groveland, Highland area with all of them. So it's pretty spread out, but Western District carries the bulk, whereas their lowest is 10, and the highest amount in any of the other single grids was 7 or 8. And the other thing, just to hit on a few other things, we've talked a little bit about some of the deterrents that are out there. The city did put forward an ordinance that doesn't allow them to sell it within the city of St. Paul. The difficulty that we see is they just go take and sell it in Minneapolis or one of the suburbs to one of the metals places over there. So it was really a temporary fix that hasn't really slowed things down. If anything, we've seen an increase now. So unless it's a statewide fix, we're going to continue to see this problem because there's no serial numbers on the catalytic converter. So once it's cut off, unless we basically catch them in the act of doing it, we have no proof that it's stolen. So we can't make the arrests we would like to be able to make. If we catch a guy with 14 of them in his car, we can't arrest him for catalytic converter theft because we can't prove they're stolen right now. And so those are where the gaps are lying. For the deterrence, we have talked a lot about them. The cat cages can help, the cat strap, the cat shield, the cat eye. If you've got a Prius, park in the garage if you can or in a secure area. They really, really target the Prius and the Toyota Highlander right now are the two that we're seeing the most targeted.
This is Cynthia MacArthur again. Is there any information about why the Prius and the Highlander are preferred over others?
They have a higher rate of the precious metals in them, so they've got more platinum and palladium in them than the other models do.
They're also lighter. The Prius is very light, so it's easy for them to jack up. And the Highlander is higher off the ground, so they don't have to work very hard.
And one of the biggest reasons is that the Prius, because it uses an electric engine most of the time, it's not sending exhaust through the converter, and so it's not exhausting the catalysts.
Is there any competition happening with the manufacturers about making a Cadillac converter so it can remain on the car?
Good question.
So, if those are general questions, I think might be effective to ask the legislators during the legislation time. Does anyone else have any questions for Patty? Or Patty, are you done with your presentation, or is there any bit more?
Yes, no, I'm finished.
All right. So I'm gonna try to get back to the schedule, the program schedule. So like we are now essentially we're gonna have like a town hall discussion. So let me just introduce myself. My name is Abu Naeem. I'm a St. Paul resident and community organizer. I'm the host, organizer, and moderator for this event. The reason why we are having this meeting on catalytic converter thefts is that the dramatic increase throughout the state and the country, and over 1,500 Minnesotans signed a petition, emailed, and called their representative, demanding legislators to take swift and effective action. As citizens mentioned, there was discussion of putting legislation last year dealing with catalytic converter thefts, but that did not build any traction going forward, and that was Senator John Marty's bill. So, and currently at the Minnesotan legislature side, there's the most simplified way I can describe it is that there's two separate bills, two separate type of bills that are to deal with to regulate catalytic converter thefts. There's the Republican bill SF 206, authored by State Senator Karen Housley, and there's Democratic bill SF 890, authored by State Senator John Marty. So just to give a sense for citizens to what the Minnesota legislature is like. So normally there's a Senate bill and there's a companion bill, a House companion bill, and those are pretty much the same bill and they have the same language, but there's a different author for it. So right now there is with us right now is Tony Jurgens, who is the companion bill for SF 206, Karen Housley's bill, is at HF 330. So he's here and you can, give an explanation of the bill itself. So so essentially this is why we're having this meeting, is that at the current makeup of the Minnesota legislature, The Democratic bill will pass the House, and the Republican bill will pass in the Senate. So this, because they're not the same bill, it creates a bit of conflict. There might be some disagreements. And this will lead to unnecessary gridlock and delay the process and may undermine effective legislation to be passed. So the goal of this meeting is to bring the legislators here, the legislative authors and representatives here, and see if they can mutually agree to take nonpartisan action to get swift and effective legislation through the Minnesota legislation. So I just want to reiterate that this is a discussion, not a debate. There's no point of finger pointing. It's really about how do we address this problem and how do we do this in an effective, meaningful way, and we can sort of all agree going forward. So with that said, the first question is, since Senator John Marty sponsored a bill last year, so I would like to ask what happened to that bill. Tell citizens more, like what happened to that bill and what's the difference about this bill this year.
Now I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I didn't get the bill. The bill was not heard last year. The committee chairs get to determine which bills they hear, and I've had trouble getting any of my bills heard in the last few years. So there's no guarantee it will. The bill we introduced last year and this year, it's changed a lot. I started on the bill last year because of the great concern. Started because of concern about what's going on. And unfortunately, we had looked at what other states were doing to try and stop catalytic converter theft and didn't find a lot that seemed to do much. And we tried a bill based on some of the best ideas from that. And over the coming months, we've been talking with more and more folks, including St. Paul and other police departments, and hearing what the problems are. And it's not an easy issue to get at, but we think the bill we have this year is a good one, and we think it'll make a real dent. I don't think any piece of legislation will solve the problem, but I think the problem we have now is you talk to police in any of the communities. We've heard from Moorhead, we've heard from Maplewood, St. Paul, other departments. And the trouble is they will often stop a car, see 3 or 4 catalytic converters in the back seat, and maybe even some sawzall or something, and to cut them off. And they know what happened, but they can't seize them because they can't prove they were stolen property. So we've been trying to work out things that would make it different. In effect, strengthen our laws for scrap metal dealers and require that you cannot buy a catalytic converter, a used catalytic converter in Minnesota. If you are not a licensed dealer, you cannot buy a used catalytic converter in Minnesota. That's what we're trying to push. Well, that may be controversial for some. The other thing we're trying to say is if you possess a catalytic converter without evidence, without proof of your ownership, it's illegal. And that's a controversial thing. People may have come by them in a legitimate way. I think it might be 1 in 3,000 that's a legitimately owned one, but what we're trying to say, we think it should be that if you have these in your possession and they stop you, they could confiscate the converters and arrest you for breaking the law. Same thing with the fly-by-night dealers, because a lot of folks, you look at Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, you can find all kinds of, hey, we buy a used converter, we pay cash. And so we're trying to say you can't, those folks, unless they're licensed scrap metal dealers, they're not going to be able to buy it. That way the police could do a simple sting operation. They take an ad in Facebook Marketplace, they contact the person says, oh, we'll be at such and such parking lot at 7 in the morning Saturday, we'll meet you there. And police go there. If the person tries to buy one, they'd be breaking the law, they can make the arrest. But the simple thing, well, there are other things we have in the bill too. You can't make cash purchases for it. One quote, legitimate, maybe, catalytic converter recovery business, recycling business, said, oh, we do hardly any, very small portion of our business is the individual customers. Most of them are auto businesses that bring them in. And this place, it sounded like they were doing like 1,000 converters a day. And I said, well, how, what's a small percentage of your business? Oh, only 10 or 20%. I'm thinking that sounds like 100 to 200 converters from people coming in trying to cash them in a day. And when we told them our bill would prohibit cash purchases, you'd have to pay by check or electronic bank transfer or something several days after the transaction occurred. Oh, we just purchased this, got this huge expensive cash machine. That's great. A cash machine at a scrap dealer placed in order to buy catalytic converters from thieves. And I can't prove that, but I'm just saying this is I think it's not an onerous burden on a business to say they have to pay for them they have to pay for them with electronic payment or a check mailed to somebody's address a few days later. And so what we're trying to do is make it so we're targeting the dishonest folks. And some of the licensed scrap dealers may be breaking the law. We'd be requiring you to, if I repair my car and I change catalytic converter on and I have a used one I'm going to turn in, I have to show evidence, show the car before and after taking it off so you can show it's not cut off. Show them evidence that it's your car and that you bought a new catalytic converter. I talked to one guy in northern Minnesota who was concerned that he wouldn't be able to sell them because we basically say you can buy them from a legitimate bona fide auto repair shop or auto recycling business. But if you're buying from an individual, you have to go these extra hoops. And he wanted to make sure he would be allowed to sell them because he said, I got 2 of them. I've had them for a couple of years and so on. And I said, well, we'd like you to require something like evidence that you purchased a replacement one. Oh, I got the receipts for that. I could do that. And that's the type of thing we have to do. It's a burden for people. But when you talk to the people, some of the stories we were hearing a little bit earlier, the horrendous burden on the people who are victims of the thieves. We have to do something. And the biggest difference isn't going to be super strong penalties. The biggest difference is going to be allowing the police to confiscate clearly stolen property. I think it was one of the departments we talked to said, oh yeah, they've been at some hotel where a lot of criminal activities occur in the parking lot, and they've been there several times and seen cars with multiple converters in the trunk or the back seat, and they have to let them go because they can't prove they're stolen. They kind of know they were, but you can't prove it, and the police don't have probable cause then. So by making it a crime to possess them without evidence of ownership, then they could confiscate them, and if they actually do have this stuff, they could bring them into the police department and show, hey, look, here's the evidence we own them, get them back. But the sad thing is, and I don't want to have a huge burden, one more thing I'll say quickly, I don't want to have a huge burden on businesses just for the sake of putting a huge burden on them. We originally had, my bill last year had more work that auto recycler or auto business would have to prove in selling their converters. Talked to one scrap yard place that deals with like 18,000 cars a year. And then you figure out that a lot of cars have 2 or so converters on them. They could have 30,000 converters a year they're selling to different scrap metal dealers and saying, okay, we're going to give you a list of 18,000 VIN numbers. They have no connection to the catalytic converters. They have nothing else. I don't want to give them paperwork just to do paperwork. Police or victims of theft, we'd allow to inspect the records at these at the scrap metal dealers, but they're not going to be able to do anything out of 30,000 converters. What we have to do is catch them as much as you can. If you talk to the police about the only way they can stop somebody now is if they see them in the act of cutting it out from underneath. And that's relatively rare. But if they see them 5 minutes later and they got 3 of them in the car and they know where they got them, but they can't prove it, they have to let them go. And so I think our bill, we looked at what everybody else in the country had done, And we think we've got some good provisions in here. We think it would be something that really would make a difference. I'm thinking of writing some things up for legislators and people in other states, because I think this, I can't guarantee it, but I think this would make a real difference. And again, I don't think this is a partisan issue. I hope that both parties will support. I'm hoping for a hearing. I've asked for one. We'll ask for one a couple times and keep trying, but I don't care how we do it. I just want something that works. And I think the approach we're taking now will enable the police to take them. They couldn't legally have the person forfeit them unless they can show that they broke the law. And here they'd be breaking the law if they have the converters in their possession without the evidence of ownership. But we have to change the law to do that, and there may be some controversy on that. But I've heard so many legislators who have had their own converters stolen now, and so many constituents who are contacting people. I really am optimistic we'll get something done this year.
All right. Thank you so much, Senator John Marty. Definitely, Representative Tony Jurgens. So my question for you is, could you explain the bill HF 330 and provide more details, and also give, if you want to, give some distinction of John Marty's bill, like what does it have or what doesn't have?
Yeah, I can. First of all, Senator Marty's been at this a lot longer than I have, working on this last year. And how I got involved with this is, like Senator Marty said, a lot of us are hearing from our constituents. And I got an email from a father whose son lives in Minneapolis and had his catalytic converter stolen twice. And the other day I heard from another constituent whose daughter lives in St. Paul and had hers stolen. And so I started looking at solutions, and I came up, got some advice on a bill that is, my bill is actually House File 637. And I don't know that this is the solution. In fact, the more I learn about the problem, I don't think that it is. I do like a lot of the components in Senator Marty's bill. And in fact, I have asked to be added as a co-author on the House version of that. So this isn't a partisan issue. I think sometimes you just get people working in their own little silos, not really knowing what's happening on the other side. And I'd be happy to work with Senator Marty on this. And you know, if we can get his bill passed and that helps, I'm happy. And if there's components of my bill that are part of that, that's great, but it doesn't have to be. What I've been learning as I've talked to law enforcement and talked to other people is that, you know, it makes common sense to say, well, let's cut down on the demand side. So if we can go to the scrap metal dealer or the recycling centers and prevent them from buying the stolen property, then that'll solve our problems. But it doesn't. And as Patricia Lammer said, with the city ordinance in St. Paul, that just pushed them to Minneapolis and to the suburbs. So if we make a law that says that you can't sell them in Minnesota, what do you think is going to happen? It already is happening. They're taking them to Nebraska. They're taking them to Wisconsin. It's a lot more organized than one or two catalytic converters that a couple of high school kids swipe. It's a lot more. They're trucking them to other states where they can sell them. So we can put some safeguards in place, whether it's components of my bill that focus on gathering information and requiring information at the scrap metal dealer's side, or Senator Marty's got some good components in his. That's just going to push it somewhere else. So we have to figure out another way. And I heard Patricia Lammer say it, and I heard Senator Marty say it. What I've been thinking of is, and Senator, I'll work with you on this if you want to. Maybe we amend your bill or mine, or come up with a whole other one. But we have to do something about the possession of catalytic converters that you can't prove ownership of. If you have possession of 2 or more catalytic converters and you can't prove that you have ownership of them through the receipts, like you said, Senator Marty, with, you know, here's the VIN of the vehicle, here's the receipt that I bought a replacement catalytic converter. It's a gross misdemeanor or something like that. I don't know make it a felony if we can, but I don't know if we get that far with it. But we have to be able to help law enforcement because, and Patricia, I've heard the same story from other law enforcement that they'll pull somebody over for an unrelated offense. They have 5 catalytic converters and a Sawzall in their car, and they can't do anything about it. They can't prove that they're stolen, and they know they are, but they have to let them go. So I think that's where we need to address this. And I think if you look down the road, where's this going to go from here? what I worry about is how are we going to address it if they start taking the materials out of the catalytic converter and selling the materials instead of the whole piece? Because now we've got people that just have these precious metals in their possession. How do we prove where that came from? And so I don't think that the problem is going to, has an easy solution. I appreciate the stories I heard today because I've heard them from my constituents and from others. And I think we all want to do something to solve it. The question is, what is the solution? And I think we've come up with some possibilities and some ideas. But as we see, and you know better than any of us, Patricia, in law enforcement, sometimes you just push the problem to another area. Drug deals, you close down one corner, you just push them to another corner. Well, with catalytic converter sales, we push them out of St. Paul, they go to Minneapolis. If we push them out of Minnesota, they go to another state. And what happens, you're still getting your catalytic converters stolen. You're still going through the steps that you have to go through to replace those and the cost. We need to find a way to actually solve the problem. And I'm open to doing that. I'm not sure that I have the best solution, though. I've got some things that I'm willing to try. And I think that we can get bipartisan support both on the House and the Senate, something that the governor will sign. And if it helps the problem, great. If it solves it, even better. But it seems to be a tough one to really know exactly what's going to solve the problem. So I don't know, Senator Marty, if you have any comments based on that, any ideas, but I think that that's a direction that we need to go, is doing something about those that are found in possession of catalytic converters and they can't prove that they came by them lawfully.
Yes, I hope I'm not muted. Yes, yeah, thank you, Representative Jurgens. Yeah, I agree. I think this, as I said, I don't think this needs to be and should be or will be a partisan issue. And I think we should work together on this. I do believe that we can actually, I'm a little more optimistic we can have a significant dent in the problem. A lot of the people who are doing hundreds of these, and there are some who are making a ton of money stealing hundreds of these, they're much easier for them to sell them in Wisconsin or in Iowa. But a lot of the cases they have it now, it's somebody coming in from wherever and setting up shop in a supermarket parking lot at 7 in the morning on some day and come here with your 10 converters, we'll pay cash for them and you're on your way. And I think that's why making it illegal for them to buy in Minnesota, that gives the police the chance to stop those folks. In other words, the only people who'd be allowed to buy in Minnesota would be the scrap dealers. And so if we can take that out, it does make it a lot harder for thieves to get them. And then you're transporting huge amounts of stolen property across state lines, which gets into federal violations, which might have a little difference. But the other thing is, as you mentioned about, the thing that I think is the most successful, most likely to be successful part of the bill we've been working on is the one that you cannot possess. Not that you can't possess stolen property, because that's already a crime, but that you cannot possess a used catalytic converter without evidence of ownership. And we can do that if we can convince our colleagues to make that change. And again, that gives the police a chance to do something. And that's the best chance. The police have very little chance of stopping somebody when it's happening. But when they're driving around, they have any reason. They've reported enough times when they've stopped cars with converters in them, with cut-off converters in them. They just can't do anything now. And I think this gives me the best hope. And from what I'm hearing from police, I think we should be sharing these ideas with people across the country, because the more states that do this kind of thing, the faster we'll have a chance of cutting back. And if we cut the problem in St. Paul or any of the suburbs around it in half, that's half the people who've been victims and won't be victims next time. And so I think we should do everything we can. And I agree. I'm hopeful we will get something done this year.
And I have reached out to the insurance industry too. I'm an insurance agent, so I see that side of it. And although I'm not too active in insurance when I'm here at the legislature, but for those of you that are filing claims, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if you have multiple claims, you're going to end up paying higher premiums too. And not everybody has the comprehensive coverage on their vehicle. We heard a few people talking about $500 deductible or $1,000 deductibles. You're still out that amount of money. If your insurance company pays 2 or 3 comp claims to cover the cost of replacing a catalytic converter, and then if you come to me to buy car insurance, I run a report that says how many claims have you filed in the last 3 years. And if you have too many claims, none of my carriers are going to be interested in even covering you. So that's a problem. Whether it's windshields, whether it's glass, cracked windshields, or whatever it is, catalytic converters, those are claims. And when the insurance companies pay out claims for whatever reason, they're going to end up increasing your premiums or increasing everybody's premiums.
So I have a question regarding about enforcement. So when police catch thieves on the act, they can be charged a crime, and accordingly, if there is thefts over $500, so a catalytic converter costs more than $500, it's considered a felony offense. So I've been reading some reports where people that have been caught, at the act of cutting catalytic converters, that they go back in the streets. Like they're not charged in the criminal system. They're not jailed. And do you have any thoughts on that? Or is there any, which governmental agency is responsible, and what can the legislature do about this? Or is this a county level discussion? And to give you an example, this happened, I read an article in Minneapolis, a man that was caught, quote unquote, red-handedly, and he's still in the streets.
First of all, you're not going to go serve years in prison for stealing a catalytic converter. The trouble we have now is the police can't even stop the person. If somebody does something repeatedly, you have chances of getting sanctions. But the trouble is if they see a car with 2 guys in it and 3 catalytic converters, that would be felony theft, but they can't show they're stolen, and so they can't stop them. They can't do anything. So then the quote owners of those 3 converters, the guys driving the car, can go off and sell them. So that's why I think Representative Jurgens and I seem to be saying the same thing on that, is you got to make it the crime for possession of converters without evidence of ownership. So that way they have the ability to seize them. You get them once for that. They do it again. You enhance the penalty for repeat violations. You can get stuff to happen. The trouble is somebody gets caught one time red-handed, and it's a one-time offense. They just don't get caught again. It's so hard to catch somebody, and that's why we're hoping that these changes in terms of who can sell them, who can buy them, who can possess them, we're hoping that that'll make a dent. And I think the combination of things will. And I'm very optimistic about that. And again, that's after I've been trying for the last year, trying to listen to what other states have tried, and finding a lot of them don't seem to make a difference. And that's when you hear from local prosecutors and police saying, well, we can't do anything about it because we can't prove they're stolen. We may know they are. Again, you can't know beyond a reasonable doubt, but if I've got 3 catalytic converters and a saw on the back of my car, you know what's happening. You just can't prove it. And we're trying to say, well, we're going to change it so it's illegal to do that. I should ask if either representatives of the police department or any of the folks who are been victims of this have any comments that we should take back to the Capitol.
I got a huge question. My question is, what's the end product? Is there a new vehicle coming out that needs these precious metals? Is there a new cell phone coming out? Why the increase in the last sort of year? What is the demand for these metals? I would really like to know that. because then maybe that can be put into question, like follow the ant trail, you know?
Yeah, no, they're just precious metals. I mean, New York Times article on this about a month ago. I think the Star Tribune reprinted it. Yeah, the palladium is, what is it, 12 times as valuable as gold? One of my colleagues said something like, yeah, we bolt something far more precious than gold on the bottom of our cars, and we don't think there might be a problem. Well, the long-term solution, several companies have said, I mean, timeline, electric vehicles, because of costs falling and everything else, it's likely that we'll have far more electric vehicles, far less internal combustion engines a decade from now, and that will take away the need, because these are only needed for internal combustion engines. But that's not a quick fix, and even then, not everybody's going to have new cars then. So we'll have catalytic converters for quite a while. And the value of the metals has been so great because you need them for, this is one of the biggest uses of them. And a lot of countries, China is getting a lot more cars being built for their own use. So the demand for the metals has gone way up and the supply has not gone up. So that's just the nature of the market.
This is Cheryl Garahan again. I just read an article that said that part of the problem is with COVID, that the metals are coming out of Africa and they're short-staffed, and so they're not bringing them out of the ground like they were before. So that's why the cost of the metals has increased exponentially. So that's part of it. The price of the metals has gone up, I don't know, 12 times or something. So it's a really easy crime, because I've watched some videos and people are taking them off the cars in less than 1 minute, less than 60 seconds. So I think that it's spread. You know, I know that there's a lot of kids that have been doing it, and I just want to add, I guess now too, that I talked a long time to a policeman the other day, and he said that they're really frustrated because they arrest these people and then they go down to the courthouse and then they're released. And it's really frustrating to them that they put the effort into arresting these people and then nothing happens. And I know some of them are juveniles, and I know they can't hold juveniles in adult facilities, and that might be part of the problem. But there are juvenile facilities for juvenile delinquents, because I worked with them. I was a county social worker, and I know a lot of these kids that commit these crimes. And nothing is going to stop unless they get help. This is just going to continue, and their life is going to be devastated. I mean, if we don't stop them when they're juveniles, they're just going to continue to be adult criminals. So I think in twofold we need to address the juvenile issue, and also I just want to point out that the cops are really frustrated because they see these people being released into the community. So they think, like, why even bother? So
I'd like to add, I saw a question in the comments from Kathleen of how often does this actually happen where police pull somebody over and they have multiple. And from somebody I talked to in law enforcement, he said it's weekly, sometimes several times a week that happens. So, and that's in one jurisdiction. So, I mean, I think it's pretty common.
It's usually several times a week.
Yeah.
I have a question. This is Sophie again. So first of all, thank you both for working on this. I really appreciate it. What I'm hearing is some hesitation about thinking about a law that affects Minnesota only because people will sell things in other states. And while that is true, we certainly had a mask mandate, even though everybody around us didn't, because it was the right thing to do to protect our citizens. And were there infections coming in from other states? Absolutely. But we still need to do what we can do. And in my opinion, as somebody who has had 3 of these stolen in our household, we really need to do what we can do. And there's no downside to passing this law. Is it going to be 100% effective? No. But if it's 70% effective, that's huge. If it's 30% effective, that's still huge. The other thing I'm wondering is if there's some way to add something into the law that the insurance companies can't count the catalytic converter claims against people, because that was very concerning. And I was getting the raised eyebrows from my husband when you were talking about how running it through that they're all counted as claims. So I'm wondering if that could be added to the legislation. And I agree with whoever was speaking about juveniles. We don't want to be throwing the book at them. We want to get them the help they need. And our teens are having so many issues with COVID and being out of school and everything else. We need to be sympathetic to that, but also we need to not do this. So some sort of reparations or some sort of community friendly response for underage people who are caught doing this would be my request as well.
I just want to add, I think there's some confusion there. The vast majority of those that we are catching doing catalytic converter theft are adults, not juveniles. The juveniles are committing the robberies in the city right now. So they're committing the felony level stuff. The catalytic converters are almost exclusively adults.
Thank you.
By the way, I have to leave in about 5 minutes, but I wanted to ask Police Department, Patty, if you can send us the PowerPoints, because I think it would be helpful. What the presentation you made would be helpful. And one more thing, again, yeah, I do think we could. This is the kind of thing that that's one of the reasons I want to share some of these ideas with other states, because I think they could make a difference. And as Sophie just mentioned in her point, yeah, we're not going to eliminate 100% of them, but you cut by 30% or 50%, that means those who've had 2 or 3 stolen have chances they won't have as many stolen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the whole point is we're not going to fix it by other things. We're going to have to try, and we're not going to bring the price of the meadows down cheap enough that there's no demand, because even when the meadows were cheaper, there were still thefts in the past. It's now just become highly profitable, and so we're trying to deal with that. And I am optimistic we can do something, and we can make a real difference, and want to share our ideas with people in other states as well.
And to Sophie's concern too, Minnesota, the requirements that we have on our recycling centers, the scrap metal dealers, they're already more stringent than a lot of states. So what I was saying earlier is a lot of these thefts are the more organized rings that are already taking them out of state. They're not selling them in Minnesota even today. And so those are the ones that we're not going to catch with more legislation on the buyer side, because those are already getting pushed to different states. The 1s and 2s, the kids that think that this is an easy way to make a couple $100, a lot of them are getting caught anyway, because they do take them to a local scrap metal dealer and they do end up getting caught. Not always, but it's the big organized rings that we need to be more concerned with.
So one of the things that I would like to just point out and have you guys really think about is the fact that a number of these things that are happening to people that are already in poverty. And so when you have to put out $950 to $2,500 for a catalytic converter, and you're only bringing home maybe $1,400 in a month. This is huge for these families. And so then you're without a vehicle, and then trying to get back and forth to work and trying to get your kids to where they need to get. The impact, for some people is absolutely astronomical. I know for some folks, it may not seem like as huge, but there are a lot of people that are experiencing this, that this has a very, very big impact on their lives.
Absolutely. I think that's the one thing I think Representative Jurgens and I both are going to agree. It's a huge impact. It's really outrageous. And often it's the lower income communities where they're all parking on the street. There is no garage to put it in. And I mean, your car is a sitting duck then. So I think we have to deal with this, and I think we have to treat it with the urgency it deserves. And again, I'm hoping, because I think some of these ideas that we talked about tonight are ones that really would make a difference. And from discussions with police, I think it will help. And I think we should be sharing with around the country too, because every state's got the problem. And the more we can have every state cuts them in half, we've done a great thing. So, but your point is right. I mean, the people who can least afford it often are the ones who get hit the hardest and sometimes the most.
To follow up on that, is there any way to provide aid for those families that are most needed, like that, significantly impacted from catalytic converter thefts, that, to provide support from either some sort of funding of some sort?
I'll speak to that one. I'm very concerned about income disparities and everything else. I think we ought to address that. I don't know that doing it for one theft thing, because people who are struggling are having, this is one more thing on top of everything else. I think we should try and address the broader issues for addressing that, rather than, okay, for catalytic converters, we're going to have some program for that. No, I don't think that's a good way to, we ought to address those issues that pit people so vulnerable in the first place, and we ought to address the catalytic converter theft. I would not suggest we try and find some way. It would be too complicated, too expensive, too bureaucratic to set up something to give people to random people here and there who happen to be unfortunately hit by this. We ought to address both the thefts, and we ought to address the issues that people can't make a living even when they're working full time.
I'd like to just piggyback a little bit on what Sophie said, is that I think one of the things that happens a lot of times in several different areas is that we look at stuff and we go, this is happening all across the nation. That is true. It is happening all across the nation. But I also believe that we need to, even though it's happening everywhere else, we need to really focus on our own place and our own area. And maybe we can be an example to other places and other areas as to what's working, how things are being done, and that sort of thing. So I appreciate you guys bringing this stuff forward, and I appreciate Abu bringing this to this forum also, so that we have the opportunity to be able to see where everybody's from, and give you the opportunity also to be able to hear from people who are impacted and the community at large.
Good, thank you. I strongly agree with you. Yes, we can use our ideas as a model for others, but we're trying to fix the problem here as much as we can. And because I do have to run in just a minute now, I want to ask if Abu, thank you first of all for everyone participating and so on, but also want to ask if you hear more feedback and so on, please do reach out to our office, and I'm sure Representative Jurgens would say the same. And also, if the police can share their PowerPoint, that would be helpful as well.
Thank you so much for joining us, Senator John Marty, and all the hard work you have done on this topic.
Thank you. I'm sorry I have to leave. Sorry.
Thanks, Senator. You and I need to talk.
Yeah, let's talk more. Thank you.
And Abu, thank you for organizing this. Thank you for inviting me in. I put my email address in the chat there. If people want to stay in touch, please use that. And again, I don't think this is going to be a partisan issue. I think it's just a matter of, let's find a solution that works and something that'll help.
So I would just like to add, people, obviously this is a national crisis that's occurring. It's happening everywhere. So what was really shocking when I was doing my research was there is no federal legislation addressing this. So if we recognize this is a federal issue, it's happening in multiple states, yet there is none of that sort of legislation there. So part of this campaign, so this is a citizen campaign. The citizen campaign is supposed to show that, yes, it's happening everywhere, but how can we really bring it out? Well, how can we, so if it's happening in Wisconsin, if it's happening in Illinois, if it's happening in these different states, then clearly there should be some, not just state involvement, but also federal involvement as well. So this is the part where I feel that for Minnesotans, when we sort of lead the level at the state legislature to bring legislators together to address this issue, we can bring other neighboring states involved as well. And, to create, I would say, two platforms of change, one at the state level and one at the federal level. So, and I think this is where, who's here in this room? I try to contact federal legislatures, and they're like, there's no bill either in the Senate or in the House of Representatives, because it's not a high priority item. So I think this is where, as citizens, everyone over here, we can also have the power to be able to communicate where, hey, we're working really hard on this problem that impacts everyday Americans, especially during a pandemic of all times, that this is something that needs to be addressed. So I just want to reiterate. I want to put that out there.
I've got to get running to my next meeting as well. So anything final before I check out? All right. Thank you very much. Abu, thank you again. I appreciate it.
No problem.